Hi everyone, I'm Paulus Perkkiö from Seidat and I'm here with
Christoffer Weiss. I'm the world's premier audiovisual alchemist.
Nice to have you here in our discussion room, and we will have here short discussion about presentations.
Yeah.
And
thanks for the invitation, I appreciate it.
Yeah. What presentation means for you, actually? What are they?
I think that's actually a very philosophical question, and something that a lot of speakers and presenters don't really think about. You know, we just take it for granted that it's something that we should have or something that we must have, and we don't always think about when do we actually need to have a presentation and when do we not. I think presentation, they're a tool. They're a way for you to tell your story or to make your point, to somehow augment what you are, emphasize what you're speaking about.
Yeah. And for me, this question, do we need presentations, is a little bit stupid, because I understand that presentation is the whole thing when you are presenting something.
Yeah.
It's not only the deck which you are using. How do you, what kind of terms you are using when you tell about presentation?
Well, I've actually used before the term presentation to mean the actual presentation deck, and partly after we started communicating, I've changed it, so now I'm using the term presentation deck, because like in Finnish, presentation is the actual presentation, the slideshow or and a lot of people use the term PowerPoint, or they use Keynote or whatever, because that's the software they're using. So I think the right term is the deck. And if you look at it, it's kind of like the deck of cards. You know, if you make that parallel, that's the tool, that's the stuff that you can play with. And it's not always exactly, like your whole deck is not, you're not showing your whole deck all the time. You're not playing your whole deck. You're making all these slides, and then you're choosing the right deck for the right situation. Yeah. And I think that's a feature that I really like about with your software, is that you can have this big selection of different kinds of slides, individual slides, and then you can make your deck appropriate for whatever situation you're going to go and speak in.
Yeah. Can you shortly tell about your background? You are an actor, actually.
Yes. I'm a classically trained actor. I went to the theater academy here in Helsinki, and I've been acting semi-professionally since I was a teenager, and professionally, for over 20 years. And I kind of stumbled into this world, and I saw there was a lot of parallels between acting and public speaking, but it is a different medium, and it is a different purpose. One thing I like about public speaking or speaking in general and events is that in theater you tell a 3-hour story to make a point. And in public speaking you make your point in like 3 seconds or 3 minutes or 18 minutes or something like that. So I like the directness of public speaking, but in good quality talks there are theatrical elements. And as an actor I was always taught to just have the story here, that I don't need any props, I don't need any backgrounds, I don't need any lights. But obviously in theater and in movies and in all kinds of different acting mediums, we are using other elements as well. We're using lights, we're using sound, we're using rhythm, we're using backgrounds, we're backdrops. And I see now more and more, because technology has evolved, we're seeing more projection screens, we're seeing more LED walls, we're seeing lights that actually are projectors in theater as well, because they have realized that it's easier to tell a story, and you can show so much more with the use of media. But you should use it sparingly and very, very precisely. So I find it is a nice kind of connection between these two, even if it's a totally different form.
Because I think that because of you are actor, it's nice to discuss with you about presentations. Because as an actor, people typically think that it's the body, the way you use your voice, and everything of that it's everything. And at the same time, I work mainly with salespeople, and many salespeople are thinking that they don't need any help. They don't need any presentation decks. It's enough that you can tell to your customer what they need, and you can discuss with them what are their needs, how you could help them, and that's why they think you don't need any help with presentation.
It's an interesting idea, or it's an interesting kind of train of thought that you don't need anything. Well, obviously you don't need to, and if you're good enough, you don't need to. And maybe people have this idea like, oh, I'm so good, I don't need anything. But it does assist you, it does help you. It is like with actors, if you're a really good actor, you don't need anything else than just an empty stage and one spotlight and an actor. Sure. Or like a stand-up comedian. Sure. But it gives a lot of extra, and it makes your life easier, and it drives points, home much more. And especially, I think in a sales, I think that's kind of a crazy idea, because especially in sales situation, it is a process, right? You're taking people on a journey, and you can't just force feed them. There's a rhythm to it. There's a kind of pace to when you tell more facts, and when you tell more emotional stuff and things like that, and then the presentation can help you in that.
And I think that in sales or in buying, it's everything is understanding.
Yeah.
Do you understand or not? Do you understand why you should buy something? And when you use something like presentations to help the buyer to understand what you are selling, it's easier.
Yeah, like I said,
it's more likely you are more likely to make deals.
Yeah, like I said, it is a tool, right? It's part of your deck. So when you're playing the game, they have a question, boom, you have that card, you can pull it. Oh, hold on, I'll show you. Yeah. Okay, somebody has a question. Instead of trying to explain everything, because people are different learners as well. Yeah. Some people, they learn best from just hearing, but most people are visual. So if you can use different aids of structuring stuff, showing images or showing stats or showing graphs, it will help you to deliver your point. And I think in a lot of companies and in a lot of also the other kind of aspect of sales is that you make too much presentations, or you rely too much on the presentations. So you're kind of hiding behind the presentation, and this you see.
And actually, you are calling yourself as an alchemist.
AudioVisual Alchemist. Yes.
Is that some kind of statement? Actually,
it is. Yes, because alchemy is something that happens when you take two elements and you fuse them together. Yeah. And some of it is chemistry, some of it is physics, and some of it is just magic. You would have no idea how it happens. And part of my work is to create those moments with speakers and with events where nobody really knows what's going on, but it's just happening, and we're in the ride together. And we're creating those moments where people get the feeling that I don't know where this is going, but I like it. It's like a good stand-up comedian when they pick somebody from the audience. Like the comedian doesn't know where it's going, and the audience doesn't know where it's going, but it's just like, let's go for the ride. And
that's the typical sales situation.
Yeah, exactly.
You never know who is the audience actually.
Yeah.
You go to company, you have made a meeting with someone, but you never know how many people there will be in the meeting room.
And who are responsive, and who is, how much feedback you get, and so on. And that's why I don't really like the basic. And one reason I'm really I like your product is that it enables the non-linear way of storytelling. Yeah. Because if you have a PowerPoint, or if you have a keynote, or if you have a linear story, it's basically like a script. as an actor, I'm used to do that. Like I get a script, you know, all of the cues are set. There's very little you can improvise. You can improvise within your own performance, but the cues, like when you go on stage and when you go off stage, when you interact with other people, they are all set because they have lighting cues and music cues and people coming in and out. You can't mess with that too much. But you can play with your own performance, yes, but not with the cues. So I'm used to having a very linear way of storytelling. And I like that, but I also like the non-linear where I can go and improvise like a stand-up comedian. You know, you have a beginning and an end, but you have no idea how you're going to go there. And as you said, this is very similar to a sales. You have a goal in mind, you have a start point, but how you're going to go there, nobody really knows. So if you then have a sales presentation, or if you have a normal presentation deck that's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and that then in your mind you are reading a script. You're going from like A, B, C, D, and so on. So for example, with your software, and if I'm thinking like how you can utilize that in both presenting on stage in front of an audience, information or whatever, or in a sales presentation, I see a lot of value in being able to just pick stuff from here and there. And this is what I'm doing with the AudioVisual Alchemy for others. So I am basically the one that picks the slides, and a lot of times I create slides like in the moment. You know, that's the alchemy part. Like somebody mentions broccoli, and I'll pull up a picture of a broccoli and boop, put it on stage. Or sometimes the speaker tells me like, hey, can you pull up a map of where I can see Florida and Cuba? And then like 10 seconds later, I'll have a map, and then they can interact with that. So this is like the optimal way of doing it, having somebody else doing it. But for example, with your software in a public speaking setting or a sales presentation, you can utilize the matrix and just pick out the stuff, or you can go back whenever you want to. Hey, can you tell me more about that stats you talked? Boom, and then you're back there. And I think that's the real mission, and that's the philosophical existence of a presentation, is to function as a tool for you to help people understand, to make your point.
Yeah. And creating slides is something like preparing your situation to the situation. It's not only creating structure for your speech. It's preparing what kind of situation you will have in that sales meeting, for example. But our title was With or Without Slides.
Yes.
Is there any situation where you should not use any slides?
Well, I think the smaller the audience, the less need for a slide. So if we're having a communication here, like I wouldn't necessarily pull out a slide deck to show you. But there could be a situation where it would be valuable, you know, that to make a point. So it's a really good question, and I don't think there's one simple answer to like when you should. But again, I think it's a tool that you could pull out when need to. But if it feels like, oh, I have to make a presentation, I think then you're already starting on the wrong foot. Yeah. But I think in general, the smaller the audience, the less need for it is, if you can communicate with like 1, 2, 3 people and you can make your point. And it's also depending on how much time you have.
Yeah. And what is the situation?
Yeah.
For example, I'm thinking about sales.
Yeah.
If you are selling some kind of IT system, for example, it's very complex. It's untouchable. It's very, very complex to tell what is it all about. It's easy to make a visualization about the system. Yeah. And when you have that visualization, even if I try to tell it only for you, one-to-one meeting, it's easy to use visualization in that kind of situations. And that's why I don't see there any problem to have a presentation or use slides when I'm alone with someone.
That's a good point, actually, yeah. So I think even more important is, can you make the point with just your telling? Yeah. And if not, then it's a tool that you can pull out. But if you're doing a better job, but then again, it's difficult to assess when are you doing and when are you when do you actually need it or not?
Because I have studied a little bit that topic. Researchers have made many studies about how people understand things.
Yeah.
And if you are only speaking all the time, for example, I'm not perfect in English. And that's why if I can have some slides with me, it's much more easier to tell what I try to tell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's only 10%. If you tell me something, I understand maybe 10% of that.
Yeah.
But if you have visualization with you, it's 8 times more. So it's 80%. And I see the difference is very huge.
Yeah. I think so too. So I think it's always good to ask, does it add something? So something that I like to say is that whenever you're doing a presentation, just be sure that the presentation is not telling exactly the same as you are telling. So it's adding something on top of it. So if I'm, like you were saying, there's a really good example with if it's an abstract, server system or whatever, that might not be built yet,
Yeah.
Then if you're only telling about it, then you are relying on other people's imagination to build that image. If we're, like I work in TV and film, and when I'm pitching projects, we're making, it's called a mood board or a storyboard or something like that, because you need to deliver the vision of what you're doing into other people's mind, because if you have 5 people reading the same short story or the same novel, they will see the situations in different ways. Yeah. But when you're doing something concrete, or sales, or when you're doing a presentation, or when you're creating a movie or a TV show, you want people to go to exactly those images that you have thought about, so they're on the same playing field. And I think this is also relevant when you're working with a project in a company, right? You want people on the same level. So when Apple builds a new complex, of course they want to have images, they want to have presentations to show stuff that doesn't exist yet, because otherwise people will visualize it in several different ways. If we say we're going to have this big circle, in the middle of a forest, people are going to see it in different ways. But if you make images or presentations, but I think Apple is a classical example of how to make good presentations, or how to make good presentation decks, because they rely a lot on pictures, and instead of having every single word written out. So this, I think, anytime you should have no presentation is if you're going to write word by word exactly what you're going to say. Then do without. If you can figure out a way how to augment, how to add something on top of what you're doing, stimulating different parts of the brain for learning or for impact or for sales, then I think you can always go with a presentation. So
even if you can only add one image.
Yeah.
You miss about scenery or whatever.
Yeah. If you're talking about downhill skis, then you just put an image of an Alp.
Telemark skiing.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
That's the real thing. Everything else is just.
And powder snow.
Yeah. Because then you're bringing people into that. If you're pitching, or selling timeshare, cabins up in the Alps somewhere. Of course, you want to have an image that can bring people into that moment instead of you having to. So I think that's
it's even better if you have a video, not only an image.
Sure.
Shortly when the powder is going.
See, you're already going in there. But yeah, it is an art form for sure. With whatever, if you're selling, like we were talking about the different situations where you could use a slideshow or a presentation deck, and generally it's like when you're selling, when you're teaching, if you're pitching a project, or if you're pitching a business, or if you're pitching a movie or something like that, and then it's inspiring people to do something. or then it's going through a meeting, of some sort. So I think those are the basic situations where you could use a presentation deck. And then you already know the goal. Like if you're doing a sales, obviously the end goal should be for people to buy, or at least take them further on that in your pipeline or in your journey. And if you're conducting a meeting, you should have an end goal. So I think generally when you start creating a presentation deck is that you should be very clear on your end goal. Like what is the purpose of this talk? Why am I going up there? Because if you don't have that, you're screwed anyway. And then you start going backwards from there is like, okay, what is the journey I want to take people on? And we Finns are we have this culture as well that we are very information oriented. That you are deemed, and this comes from the academic world, and from in the corporate world, that it's the information which should go first. And this day and age, we live in a different world. We're able to send information. Like I use your software at events where I send the presentations with Seidat afterwards. Yeah. Because then people can go back and forth and they can go through all of the information and all of the details. And sometimes I'll add information to that presentation which was not in the live presentation, links or videos or more information, because then people can go afterwards and repeat it. But like
so
when your
presentation can be some kind of memo.
Yes, exactly.
It's not only something which you present every time, but you can also send them, read them.
Yeah. And then it changes a little bit what you are presenting or what you are selling. So I would say in general it's better effect to focus on the inspiration part, to get people excited, and less on because every single person in this world is filled, like the brains are filled with information. Yeah. So to be able to fit new information, because we have this system in our brain, the reticular activation system, which chooses if the information is important or not. Like most people are going to forget about what I said just now, because it's not important yet. But when you realize that, let's say you get into telemark skiing, right? And then suddenly you start seeing billboards and advertisements about telemark skiing everywhere, because in your brain there's a switch that goes on, like telemark skiing is important. This comes from like ancient times when we needed to watch out for saber-toothed tigers or mammoths or whatever in different dangers. So when something becomes important enough, our reticular activation system picks that up from everything that's going around, because there's no way we can process all the information coming in all the time. So we have to choose. We have to be very, very specific, very careful on what we are picking out. So when you're doing a sales presentation or when you're doing a talk, and if people are not getting it, it's because it's not important enough for them. So the first mission should always be to make stuff important. Yeah. And importance is not usually facts, it's emotions.
But I can tell that in family life, I have never used presentations.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, this is why
it's something where even I don't use them.
Okay. I recently saw there was I can't remember which TV show there was. He didn't use a presentation deck, but he made on a Flipchart. He explained why he shouldn't have to clean his room as often. So maybe at some points there might be times as well. But I haven't used it either. But it's a good point. That maybe why I should get more allowance, or like if you have an argument with your wife, maybe you have to sleep outside if you take out a presentation deck at that point. Honey, can you sit down? And this only take like 20 minutes. Like I have 64 slides to go through here. Why we should go on a vacation.
Yeah. But thank you. I think this was excellent chat about presentation. Should we use them or not?
So did we come to a conclusion if you should, is there a single time or a single measure if you're going to use a presentation or not. I don't think so.
No. But my advice is do not use them with your wife or husband.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, don't use it with your wife. If I would say like if there's one rule, if there's one like guidance I could give people if they ask this question is that does it add something?
Yeah.
Does it add something to you as a salesperson, as a teacher? If it takes away from the focus, because if you're like we're communicating now, and we are in this technological overflow all the time. If we are using technology to or whatever, Flipcharts or whatever, to take away from the connection between two people or several people, then I think it's not appropriate. And especially this time that we're living in, you know, we have all these options all the time. We can stay home and we can watch YouTube or we can watch Netflix. And why we are bringing people together, why we're having meetings and why we're having sales presentations and why we're having these talks on stages is to bring people together and to listen. It's like the fireside chat, like that's our ancient history is to get, then that's where theater comes from. It's like the fireside where you're playing these characters and you're telling these stories. I think that should be always the main focus. Yeah. But people are using the presentation decks to have a little bit of distance, so they're putting the focus on that instead. And this is kind of funny because you're a presentation expert and this is your business and this is my business as well, and we're kind of telling people not to always use presentations, but I think it's better if they add something to the situation than take away.
My advice is please use presentation only if they are visual.
Yes, if they add something to your...
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.